Hey everyone, thank you so much for joining us today on Cults and Overcoming. I know it's been a while since I have put anything out, but I am back with more guests and some very interesting episodes. My guest today is someone that came from the same cult I grew up in, Restoration City. She was born and raised into this environment, became the praise and worship leader at an early age, and is actually the eldest daughter of the pastor who started this place. She is here today to tell story and what it was like growing up in this controlling atmosphere. So I'm going to go ahead and welcome Melody. Hello.
Hi. How are you, Syria?
I'm good. How are you?
I am blessed, very blessed, and very happy to reconnect with you after all these years. It's been wonderful getting back in contact with some of my old buddies and friends and people that I really, really loved and love.
Yeah, it's crazy. I cannot believe this is actually happening, let alone that you left. You've been out of there, I think, for about almost 10 years now. And it is wild that I mean, I'm just like, sorry, I'm just kind of in astonishment right now.
Me too. No,
Yeah.
I'm not. I knew this day was going to come. So,
Well, I'm glad that we're doing this, and we will get into kind of your story and everything and just everything you went through. I will say this is kind of a two-sided thing and perspective here, as you're someone that grew up in this but was also in a place of leadership and kind of putting those rules also into perspective for others, but also one that was somewhat of a victim too. But we will get into all that in this. I will say doing this interview might be a little bit controversial for some people, which the reason I wanted to do it was because I wanted to show two sides here, that in something like this, whether it's a cult or a very heavy religious background or whatever it may be, that there's two sides to things. There's people who grow up into this kind of environment and who are raised in it, and it's all you know, and that doesn't give any kind of excuse for actions, but it also will show a perspective into things of why certain things have been done. So I'll go ahead and give you the reins for just a minute and just kind of, I know you kind of wanted to speak on some of these things. So
I did. I asked, for those of you watching, I asked Syria if I could say something before we got into her questions. And I don't have anything rehearsed. I know what questions are going to be asked, and I'm fine with her asking whatever she wants to ask. But before we go, I just really wanted to ask everyone's forgiveness, apologize for my part in a place that is not doing the true work of God. And I didn't, I don't have any justification. I don't have any defense. Everything that I aligned myself that was not right was wrong. And I hurt a lot of people and families by my actions, and I'm sorry. And so I just wanted to say that up front. Thank you, Syria, for letting me come on the show. I really appreciate it.
well, thank you so much for saying that. I know that's going to mean a lot to people that have been hurt. And I really hope in some way that this starts to bring some kind of healing for those that have been hurt and for yourself. And that's one of the reasons I started doing this, for some healing to start happening. So
And I can't thank you enough for being so courageous in taking that step, Syria. Like, you have no idea how proud I am of you for standing up and saying, wait a minute, this is wrong. Like, we need to be talking about this. That's exactly what we need to be doing. And we were silenced. I know I was silenced for so long. And I cannot thank you enough. I have watched every episode that you've done and cried so many tears. And after about the third one, I said, I have to be on this show. Like, my heart was just breaking for the stories that I was hearing. Like, it's just very overwhelming. And yeah, so thank you, Syria. You have been bringing a lot of healing and a lot of things to the light that need to be discussed. Thank you so much.
Well, thank you for saying that. And I know that's going to mean a lot to those who have shared their stories and everything, and giving some kind of, what is the word I'm looking for? Just some kind of like,
Validation or
yes, like validation that what they went through actually happened,
yes, it
and
did.
that these things are real and stuff. Because in your head, I mean, it takes so a while to like decompress and everything after you've been out.
Yeah.
And I mean, I've been out for 15, 20 years, but I didn't start even doing this till a few years ago. I mean, we've always talked about stuff throughout the years, kind of like in a joking matter or something, but when it comes down to it, you realize just all the messed up things that were going on. But yeah, so I am, I know this cannot be easy because you are, like I said, you are the eldest daughter of the pastor and everything. And so, you know, just kind of coming out and speaking about these things can definitely not be an easy thing. So thank you so much for doing this. And yeah, we'll just get started.
Okay.
I might tear up once or twice. So
I
I'm
have a whole
trying.
box of Kleenex here. I can no longer talk, pray, or sing without bawling my eyes out. So
Oh my
just
gosh.
I'm prepared.
Yeah, yeah. All right. Well, just yeah, kind of just start at the beginning. I will say we have previously already spoken on how the place got open and everything, and how DK it came to opening this facility, starting as a drug rehab and all of that. But you were born into this and everything. Did you think it was kind of normal what was going on, or like we are really doing the will of God here and this is so awesome? I mean, what was your take on it as you were growing up and everything?
Well, you know, at first, I mean, I had a really like 10 and under. I have good childhood memories. I mean, for the most part. um, they, yeah, I felt like, I mean, it was when you're that young, you don't know any different. And I was allowed to go to like some outside, like preschools and kindergarten. I know there was a preschool at Braeswood Assembly of God in Houston had a preschool. I remember going there at 3, which unfortunately I also remember a sexual molestation thing happening with an older man at that age.
Oh my
So we
gosh.
won't get into that. But then I remember being at Wharton. Stephen, the school that Stephen went to, St. Thomas Episcopal. I remember going to kindergarten there, and then I was allowed to do. I did first and second grade at a public school, elementary in Wharton. But then in my third grade year is when we started homeschooling. But actually, like my experience with the homeschooling thing was completely different than y'all's. It was more structured, and it wasn't a homeschooling thing. It was actually a Christian school where we had certified teachers. This one lady that actually had lived in our house because there was me and my sister and my brother. She lived with us for a while. I used to be like a principal in Indiana or something, and so she headed up our school. I mean, like we had all the classes. It was great. It was fun. We had PE like and everything. I remember growing up thinking, I wish that I had more competition with sports because I really liked, I wanted that camaraderie and that competition. We did play sports, but, it was just, and there was, as I grew up, there was more and more and more kids. So, like, we had enough kids and teenagers to play a full out soccer game with both teams having extra people. Like, there were a lot of kids when I was growing up. And so having that camaraderie with other kids made me feel somewhat normal. It's not like we were out of the loop and every Sunday when we'd go to a church and do our little show, I knew I was different, but I had my friends with me. So it made me feel okay. Unfortunately for me, I didn't get to go to children's church much because I had to perform. So anyway.
Yeah, I was going to ask about that, about the homeschooling thing, because I had no memory of y'all doing school or anything, but I guess y'all were a little bit older than us.
Well,
So,
we had the Christian school, then it progressed into the homeschooling thing. So like everybody just kind of moved into their own homes and we started doing the life packs. You remember the Alpha Omega curriculum?
those
And
were
unfortunately,
horrible, by the way.
I know. Oh,
Oh,
and I think somebody, I don't know, I think it was Stefan too that said he had the answer keys. Somebody did. Somebody's like, I had the
yes.
answer keys.
Yeah. I think me and Hannah had the answer keys probably at one point, but I felt too guilty to look at stuff.
Well, yeah, I used him a lot, but I did get a high school diploma. Yeah, with two other people. We had a high school graduation and everything. So,
Wow, wow.
but I was not allowed to go to college. That was not an option for me.
Isn't that crazy? That was pretty much all of us until your younger brothers and sisters wanted to start going to college. And then all of a sudden, my sister could go and then other people could, but it had to be in your
I
family.
know, it was crazy. I know, my grandmother was still my dad's mom, whom I love so much, and I credit her and my grandfather to giving me the stable foundation that I had, since they practically raised me. I mean, I tell people I flew to Europe at the age of 3 by myself, and they can't believe that. But back then, you had a stewardess that was assigned to you, and it was a different world back
It
then.
was. Yep.
And so I went and stayed with them for a month because they were professors at the big Assemblies of God Bible school in Brussels, Belgium. And so they were like my parents more than it, because my parents were so busy starting the ministry, because they started the ministry. They started the Teen Challenge when I was born. And so because they were so busy, whenever they weren't overseas, they kept me. And so I'm very thankful for that, because that foundation of love is what has kept me stable for,
Well, that's,
yeah, I probably would be in a crazy house had I not had them
hmm.
ground me. And I remember, I am sorry, I am already getting choked up, but I remember many times my grandmother would try to talk to me about going to college. She wanted me out of there. That says a lot, because she was a mighty woman of God, very strong faith, and my grandparents were very honored and recognized nationally and internationally in the Assemblies of God. I mean, they worked at headquarters, and I mean, like they were amazing people, and she knew that she had to be careful
Hmm.
saying things because she knew my dad was so controlling.
Hmm.
Um, but I remember, like, she's like, honey, don't you want to go do this? And I wasn't allowed to even entertain the thought. So that's kind of sad.
And that
Yeah, go
that
ahead.
that was sorry, that was your dad's mother?
Yeah, my dad's
Yeah.
mom. She did work. Oh, she gave a lot of her time when she wasn't working for the Assemblies of God in other churches or overseas. Even after my grandfather died, she had an incredible life where she never got remarried, and she just served, and she believed in the ministry of Teen Challenge,
Mhm.
which I do too. And I think it's an amazing ministry. And even when, well, we could talk about it later, when my dad broke off from the Assemblies, she wanted so badly to keep the focus on what Teen Challenge, what it had all started for. And so I believe that, like, I need people to know her serving that place was not serving. She wasn't serving my dad. She wanted to live every day of her life until the day she died doing something to help people. And that's why, when she died, I mean, I mean, it's been dwindling. This place has been dying a slow death, a progressive slow death for many, many years. But I will say, when she died, I think it was maybe 11 years ago. I can't remember about that time. 11 or 12 years ago. Like, it was like everything that was solid was, anything left that was solid, that was right and true, was gone.
Hmm.
And yeah, so she helped a lot of people, felt really safe with her, because she did not believe that my dad should have ever started a church.
Hmm.
She would tell me, that is not a church, Melody. Yeah.
Wow.
She said, that
Wow.
is not a church, Melody. She said, that's a fellowship. And she did not support him in that. Um, and I hated to see how even my dad treated her when she was trying to help this ministry, because he hasn't really been hands-on for a long time. Like, he's been living his own little life in his own little 5,000 square foot home, and like, from what I know now, he doesn't even have his name on anything that Restoration City, like, he's taken his name off. I mean, like, he doesn't run anything. He's just the pastor of the church now.
That's a little strange.
Yeah.
Well, I
Yeah.
will say it's a testament to grandma. We called her grandma. I won't say her name. We said her full name. But we even called her grandma. And I remember, like, she would never come to the church services and would have one of the people drive her to a church in the Sugarland area.
Yep.
And she
Yep.
played piano there, right?
Well, in her later years, no, she just wanted to attend. She just wanted to be in a real church.
Yeah, for sure. I get it.
She couldn't stand the worship.
Well, it was 14 hours long. Poor lady was probably starving, like we all were.
Yeah. If she did come, which was very rare, she would wait till like 11. Like, if the service started at 10, she would show up at 11:30 or 12, like,
Mhm.
to see what kind of, especially if certain people were, if she heard other people were preaching, she would come.
That's hilarious. I remember because DK would always be like, and grandma's here. Woo! Like would make, announcement or something. But yeah,
Yeah,
she would go to another church and we were like, why is she going always to another church? But
hello.
yeah, for sure. A testament to what was going on, man.
She
Um,
wasn't, she knew what was up. Like, I remember, I mean, and we're not going to get into the whole Deborah story, but when that whole thing was happening,
another
she did
topic,
not
another
fall
topic.
for it 1 second. Like, I'd go, because she was my best friend, and I was living with her, or I had been living with her. I was living with her for some of it, and then I married Brandon in the middle of it, but I was right there, always with her. And I'd go tell my grandma, like, oh, you got to hear this, all the crazy stuff. And she would just look at me like, she'd be like, she would just change the subject. And I'd be like, you got to come over. You got to come see her. Like, she's giving these prophetic words. And she was just like, so you want to go have some ice cream?
Oh my gosh. So she knew. I will say, I was going to ask you about this, but not on here. We can talk about it like another time or do another episode or something,
Yeah.
because that whole story is a whole nother piece of God knows what. Crazy. It could be a podcast in itself, that whole story.
I'm telling you.
It is insane.
Yeah.
Um, but yeah, well, I guess I mean I would like to go ahead and ask this question, since we're talking kind of about your grandmother and like Assemblies of God and everything, because I've been very interested in this. We've all kind of speculated of why it started with the Assemblies of God and Teen Challenge and everything, but as I've spoken before, that DK broke away from that. And yeah. I mean, I think we kind of have known somewhat of the answers of why, but do you kind of want to maybe go into a little more detail?
Yeah, I do, because I think I should, because I have probably the longest history with that place, and being that I was born from day one, and my dad was the leader, I heard a lot. I mean, and I realize now that a lot of things that I was told and made to believe for so many years were lies. So for the last 8.5 years since I've been away from that place, trust me, a lot of truth has presented itself to me. But so here's the backstory really quickly. Like, my dad was raised in the Assemblies of God. His parents, preachers, well known, very respected. He decides, I mean, he had a gift. Yes, he had a gift in music. His older brother was this, classical violinist and got all the degrees in college and everything. And my dad was a lot younger. So I think there was that competitive thing there because they were really praising William for his accomplishments and everything. And my dad was musical too, but it was in a different style. He did more like folk music or whatever. And he really, really wanted the praise. Now, I need you to think about this because this is psychology coming in here. And from a young age, he wanted the attention. Okay. And a lot of times, second borns do have this competitive thing, especially if it's the same sex, 2 boys, 2 girls. And he was driven to get that attention. And so when he didn't get it, and he was very bad. He was a very bad child.
Oh man.
He was a lot to handle. My grandmother told my mom that, like, he was a really hard child. So it makes me wonder, spectrum possibly. Anyway, so he turned to drugs, did the whole hippie thing on Haight-Ashbury, in Berkeley, California, that whole thing. And that's when he went to, supposedly showed up at CBS Records, and they right on the spot offered him a record deal to be a songwriter for, like, Dean Martin, Jose Feliciano, and all these people. And according to him, he said that he knew he wasn't right with God, and he remembered a scripture that he didn't want to sell a soul to the world. So he walked away from it, found where his dad was preaching, repented, came back to the Lord. And all this time, David Wilkerson, who started all the teen challenges, had been praying for him to come back to God. And so when he came back to God, I don't know how this happened, y'all, but he was offered to take over to be a teen challenge director right after he supposedly came off drugs. Sounds like he needed to be discipled or mentored or something first, but he didn't. No therapy, no counseling, nothing. Put into this role of leadership. And and then my mom and his marriage when my mom heard that he had come back to Jesus, she believed him and came back to him. And so they were like, oh, we have this story of how God restored our marriage. Let's go help other people. If God can do this for us, and then the opportunity was presented to him. They were like, oh, this is great. We can help other people. And I do believe that I know that my mom's motives were pure, because at that point they were divorced. They had already divorced after a year of marriage. So, like, she could have stayed away, but she really believed that his conversion was genuine. And so she came back to him, and they started the teen challenge and all of that. And then they moved out to Hungerford when I was about 4 or 5. And then about 14 years old, I think I was about 14 years old, I remember the news coming that he was breaking off from the Assemblies. And the Assemblies of God had been supporting us for all those years. Like, my mom worked so hard to build friendships and relationships with all these churches. And when he made that decision, she was so upset, because she's like, what are you doing? Like, are you kidding me? Now, the story that was presented to us was that he wanted to go international, and the Assemblies of God wouldn't let him do that. And that was the biggest thing. That's all I remember hearing, is that, well, I have a vision to go overseas and to start other programs in Europe and whatever, and they won't let me do that. So this is what he said. I went to David Wilkerson, and David Wilkerson told me, David, whatever God's telling you to do it. Now, I have now come to find out that maybe he did say those things, but my dad took it as David Wilkerson blessing that move.
Oh, geez.
And that is not what he was doing. What had happened was there were so many problems that my dad was already causing in leadership under the assemblies, that they were about to confront him on some really strong allegations. According to my dad, it's always, these people came against me and they lied, and why would they come against me? Oh, I've done nothing wrong. But no, these are legitimate stories of people who, from the 70s, Syria, from the 70s, I have had them contact me recently, people from the 70s who realize that my eyes have been open now to see the truth. They feel the freedom to now say, hey, I am so proud of you. You know, you wouldn't believe that this stuff was happening back then, even when he was with the assemblies.
Mm.
So the assemblies had gotten word. These people, one of them told me they went straight to the heads in Houston that he was under, and they were about to call him in. And I don't know if he was about to get fired or what, but he knew this. He knew he was in the hot seat. So that was his way of, well, I better take the reins. Like, what do they say? What am I trying to think of right now? Anyway, I control the narrative.
For sure.
Yeah. So he had to control the narrative and take over. And, we could talk about this later, but when I met Danny, because he was involved in the Assemblies of God, all he had to do was make a couple calls, and he found out that David Kirschke's name in both the Assemblies of God and David Wilkerson's camps is not looked upon in a good light at all.
Wow. That makes a lot of sense. I mean, the thing that we were told when we were there at the center was they were breaking away from the Assemblies of God because they wanted the teen challenge to be a family oriented place.
No,
meaning
that's incorrect.
Yeah.
I'm sorry. I know it's hard for people that kind of heard the story, but we were already a family center. We were the only family center. We were the only teen challenge in the nation, in the world, that took in single guys, single girls, single dads, single moms, and whole families, which is why there was a year-long waiting list. Now, this is when he was with Teen Challenge.
Okay.
That's why we were getting people from all over the country, because these families didn't want to be separated. And so he saw an opportunity that it was at its greatest right before he pulled out from the assemblies. And he also, I must also add that I remember hearing him say that they weren't, the district, the South Texas district of the Assemblies of God, was not supporting him like they needed to.
My goodness. So yeah, just all going according to his narrative, right, so he could ultimately be in control.
Well, that's the only way that. Okay, so that's when the whole dynamic of him playing the martyr and victim really began. And he's been playing it ever since. That's how he keeps people loyal to him. Now, thankfully, there's very few left. The ones that are left out there, my heart breaks for, because there are some very good intentioned people out there that I believe do have good hearts and have no idea what the truth really is. And the reason why they don't know the truth, even though they should be able to open their eyes and kind of look at the fruit and the non-fruit and the bad fruit and all of these things, the reason why they don't know that they know is because my dad doesn't let anybody into his He doesn't let anybody get close to
Yeah.
him.
Yeah.
So, this being that I was family, I know who the real David Kirschke is, and he's a joke.
Crazy, man, crazy. Yeah, I mean, there's very few people left out there now. I will say, and I agree with you that there are some people that are still there that do have good hearts and everything, but are just so brainwashed
Well,
by
they're
this.
broken. They have nowhere else to go. They've given their whole entire life since 18 or whenever they came there, and now they're in their 50s, 60s. They have nothing. Where are they going to go, Syria? I mean,
I'll tell you this right now. I mean, I was there for, I mean, half my life. I had nowhere to go and I was kicked out. So, I mean, yeah, it sucks, but when you get to a point that you realize that stuff is really messed up, I would rather leave and be try to make it. And it sucked the first year after I left. That was the best decision I ever made though. So, yes, my break
absolutely.
hearts on one level for them, but at the same time, you're a grown adult and you if I could see things were wrong at the age of 23, then like I don't know.
Right.
But yeah. So let's cut back real quick
Sorry if
to
I
oh no
went
no
for it.
it's fine. I mean you could go off like there are so many stories and things that it just is crazy and wild and then I get super interested. I want to know okay I didn't know this but then like
There's a lot y'all
so
don't know.
there's so much but um let's cut to you are a singer songwriter. You did start at a very young age of singing. Was that always in your heart to want to do even at a young age?
Well, my dad was very into his music. Even after starting the Teen Challenge, I mean, we have lots and lots of pictures of, his efforts to still continue his music to an extent, or, he was a great songwriter, very, very gifted. And he was very protective of even the kinds of music that I listened to, even in the Christian genre. Like, he had me be classically, I started taking classical piano at the age of 5, but I started singing in public at the age of 3. And I loved to sing. It was yes, it was a natural gift. My parents said like at 8 months old is when I started humming actual tunes, and they were like, she's like singing a tune. And so at the age of 3, I started, singing in public. And I loved to sing, and I loved playing the piano. But my dad would it had to be everything it had to be so complicated and complex. Like you're only going to listen to, he wouldn't make me listen to classical music. That's what I had to study for piano. But like, as far as any I was only allowed to listen to Christian music. And the ones that I could listen to had to be like the most talented and anointed.
Oh my goodness.
And like I was not allowed to listen to Amy Grant because she wasn't talented
She,
enough.
oh, I was gonna say, was she too secular?
Yes, yes. And then when she crossed over,
Oh yeah, she crossed
oh
over.
God forbid, she is going to hell.
Yep.
Do not listen to Amy Grant now. So I did love it, and I made my first album when I was 10. I remember going to Springfield, Missouri. That was fun. And my cousins who lived there, Paul and them, they sang. My aunt played the harp, and that was a cool experience as a 10-year-old. I mean, I definitely felt myself at that point being put on this pedestal, even though I couldn't compute that in my 10-year-old mind. I could feel that I was being looked upon as gifted, and I didn't know how to process that, so I just went with it. I mean, I just did what I was told. Like I told somebody this the other day, and I broke down crying because I never really thought of it, but it's the truth. Like, my dad is a big talker, and as you know, very long-winded, and he thinks that everything that he has to say is of utmost importance, and everybody better listen. And as a matter of fact, if you don't listen, you're going to get called out. You're going to be rebuked. I mean, like, he thinks that he is like, no one else has anything of value to say. They better listen to him because he does. So anyway, I remember being very young, like 5, 6. I have a 5, my youngest is 5, he's like, I am so blessed to have young children again because I'm getting to really, really do it right this time. Thank you, Jesus. But I remember being up late at people's house, 11, 12, 1 o'clock at night, and me falling asleep and then being woke up. Come, you need to come sing. You need to come sing. And, I'm 5, 6 years old. I'm tired. And then if I didn't want to, I'd get beat.
Oh, like you would get spanked?
I would get spanked until I did what he wanted me to do when he wanted me to do it.
Would
There
you
was
get
no,
spanked? Would you
oh
get
yeah,
spanked by him?
oh yeah. He
Um,
would take me in the other room and get me to wake up and get me to, because he was putting on a show for whoever he was with, and I was part of the show, and I was part of his show for 40 years.
wow, wow. So abuse started at an early age, and
Very early, yeah,
geez,
yeah. I mean, I loved it. I am thankful for it because it became my escape.
You're talking about music.
Music.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
It became my outlet and my escape, and yeah. So that was God preparing me for what he knew I was gonna endure, I guess.
Hmm.
So,
Yeah, I guess that kind of leads us into as you kind of get a little bit older into teenage years. There's some abuse that started going on. I don't know how much you want to go into. You don't have to go into much detail if you don't want to. This subject is a hard subject and something that we've talked about throughout this podcast. And my sister was a victim of it as well. And it's not an easy thing to discuss and everything. And sometimes it takes years for it to come out because you don't even, if it happens at a young age, you don't really know how to process what's
right.
going on and stuff. And so, yeah, sometimes it takes a little while to come out. But
Oh, yeah.
I don't know how much you want to expand on that. And
Well, I remember, yeah, it's interesting because when you think back on the timeline, and if I was 13, 14 when he broke off from the assemblies, and I literally got forced into playing piano and helping lead worship at 15.
mhm.
And the reason why was because all the pianists had left. I wonder why.
Yeah,
So I never really thought about that like that until just now. But see why it's therapeutic to talk? Because it's
for
like,
sure.
yeah. So I remember I had only played and sang at home for fun. I had never done that in public. My piano playing was strictly for classical performances. I was already competing against college kids at 15 in classical. And then my singing, I would do separate. And so I would mess around at home, and I thought it would be really cool to be able to do that, but I had no training in that. And then all of a sudden I was like thrown into like, you have to play. You have to play. We have no one to play.
Mm.
And so I remember being petrified and having the sheet music to every song. Because when you're classically trained and you know how to read music, in order to learn a classical piece, unless you're a musical genius, you have to read music, and learn it that way. There are some geniuses that can somehow miraculously pick it all up by ear, but I was not trained that way. I can play by ear, but that was totally different. So I was like this, like the whole first year, I was just petrified. Well, it was also during that same year that I got sexually molested, and by a man who was at least twice my age, or 10 years, 12. I don't know how many years older than he was, but he was already married with a child. And I had never even kissed a boy up to that point. I know that some of y'all might find that hard to believe because all you know of me is promiscuous Melody, but I really had never kissed. I had, like, as little kids, like 5 or 6 years old, play house, but not a real boyfriend,
Mhm.
kiss that I had a crush on somebody. And Brandon, who is my ex-husband, had come in. So he came in Teen Challenge in 89. So I was 14 when Brandon came. And So by that time, he was already getting to the end of the program, and I was really interested in him, and I thought he was cute and everything. Now, mind you, my dad had always told me, you will never marry somebody that comes through this program.
Hmm.
Yeah, I mean, he was like, because, and the reason why is because they have drugs in their background or whatever, and when real life hits them, they're going to go back to that, and I don't want that for you. And so I wanted to have a relationship with Brandon, and then all of a sudden, next thing I know, I'm asleep at this. I was at this guy's house because he was supposed to leave early the next morning to go on a prison service with my mom and some other leaders, and I was staying at his house with his wife, who had just had her second baby, to help her with their toddler and their little baby. And I just remember being woke up to something on his lips on mine, and not knowing what was happening. And then he left, and I'm just in this state of shock. I can't tell his wife. I mean, I don't know what, I mean, I'm 15, so it's not like I'm 9. I mean, I understand what just happened, but I'm shocked. I was just in complete shock. So then it continued. It got progressively more and more physical, and him luring me and pressuring me to do things that I didn't want to be doing. Like I said, like, I was very much wanting to have a normal boyfriend girlfriend relationship with Brandon, who was now out of the program and decided to stay there and help with the ministry. And I mean, Syria, I mean, I don't know why I'm thinking of this. Maybe it's because I'm supposed to share it, but I remember how I don't know if you remember how the guys would, like, they played baseball and basketball and they would play in different leagues.
Yes.
Well,
Yeah.
they used to have a basketball team that played in a basketball league that Faith Assembly in Pasadena has.
Hmm.
And we went there for years. And so, as a teenager, if there was a cute guy in the program or a cute guy anywhere, you'd use any opportunity to, like, be around him, right? So they would load up this van full of guys, and then there would sometimes be a few extra spaces for people that wanted to come watch the game to go. And so I remember going, and I remember coming back, and this is so insane to me, but it's my story. And I remember being on the end of a seat, and Brandon was sitting behind me, and this man was sitting next to me, and they were both touching me at the same time.
What?
Yes. And I'm just sitting there going, oh my gosh. I mean, Brandon is innocent enough. I mean, like, he doesn't know that anything is going on here, and he doesn't know that. And I'm just sitting there going, oh dear Jesus. I mean, like, at 15 years old. And I don't know. Anyway, I just remember telling this man, look, I don't want to do this. Is wrong. Like, this should not be happening. And I want to have, he would not have it. He was like, you do not need to be with him, and all this stuff. And so I finally, after a year, I just literally couldn't take it anymore. And I said, and I finally got him to stop. And I mean, Syria, I remember, this is the most insane thing, and I don't think I've ever told anybody this. I remember being on a Europe trip with this man, and him telling me this. He said, I know that this is going to sound crazy to you, but I've loved you since you were 10 years old.
What?
I'm like, I mean, I'm 15. I'm getting developed. I'm a teenager now, so I can see how some pervert would. I don't understand the whole child thing. Like, how can
Holy
any man,
crap.
like, even view a 10-year-old? It just, anyway, yeah, that was crazy. But anyway,
Yeah, for
so
sure.
yeah, I finally got him to stop, and he would threaten me and say, that you cannot tell anybody. It will ruin everything for me. And it was just eating me up and eating me up. And I would just replay over and over these haunting memories of things. And I just felt so dirty and so disgusting. And I remember I was 18 years old, and we had a church service, and my dad wasn't there, but it was a pretty awesome service. And I remember hearing this voice inside say, "You have to confess this." And what had happened in the service was God had used me in a way that I had never been used before, and it kind of blew me away. So I was like, I want more of that. Like, you know what I'm saying? It was like a whole nother level. And then that's when I heard this voice say, if you want to continue like hearing from me like this, then you've got to confess this, because it's eating you up alive. And I just remember grabbing one of the elders and verbally vomiting with him on the stage while the praise team is tearing down all of the equipment. And that man was part of that team, and he's watching the whole time. And so after I said everything, and this was this elder's best friend. So it took a lot of courage for me to even tell him, because I knew how close he was to him. And I knew everybody thought this guy was the greatest thing. He was this, wonderful athlete and super hilarious and a musician, which is why my dad thought of the world of him. See, you had to be charismatic, intelligent, have degrees, or be talented for my dad to deem you as important.
Or have money.
Or have money. Sorry, that's the biggest one.
To add that.
Thank you. That's the biggest one. And so because he brought a lot of attention in a funny way, in a humorous way, in a great way on the outreach team, it was like, he really liked him. So my dad was gone, and it was Father's Day weekend. And this elder said, let's let Sunday go. Let's have Father's Day. And then on Monday, I'm going to walk you to your dad, and I will help you tell him this, because he's going to have to handle this, because this man was in leadership. And this person said, Melody, go ahead and tell your dad what you need to say. And of course, like, I didn't even know how to say it, but I don't even remember what came out of my mouth. All I remember is his reaction was, "Oh, Melody." Like, it was my fault. Like, I had just ruined something by telling him that I had been abused by this man. And so next thing I know, they're calling in the family and telling them they're forced to move off campus, and he's forced to apologize to me, I think. But I still felt like I had done something wrong, and I remember going to his wife, and like, I didn't need to apologize for anything. I was freaking taken advantage of and abused, and yet I was forced to reconcile. Anyway, they ended up moving far away, and it was never talked about again. Never. I was never taken to counseling. My mom. Now, this is heavy, Syria, because just last year, I found out that my mom had no idea until last year, when we were having this conversation at her home in Vegas. She had no idea that I went through all that. My dad told her, because my mom is a truth teller. She doesn't put up with crap. And that's why she left my dad. She had had enough. I don't know how she lasted as long as she did, honestly. But anyway, my dad had told her that all this man did was introduce me to the birds and the bees and kind of touched me a few times. He did everything but take away my virginity completely. Jeez. And he made me do things that I did not want to do. And it has haunted me to this day. And I'll tell you something, for any of you listening that have experienced sexual abuse, it takes I was made to suppress it and suppress it and suppress it and suppress it. Now, when I did end up marrying Brandon, he knew what had happened, and he knew who it had happened with. But even sadder is that from the time this man was left to leave, and he went on his way, my dad freaking invited him on multiple occasions to come help him coach my little brother's soccer leagues and do these soccer clinics. And it was just his greatest little old pal from the past, buddy. And I'm like, I mean, what does that say to a daughter who was, her whole identity was literally changed at 15? Innocence out the window, purity out the window. Everything that I had lived up until that point that was genuine, that I believe, like just got all messed up. And that, when I married my second husband, who I'm married to now, this is crazy. And I was remembering this on the way here, Siri, and I think it's because I need to say it. I had not, when I finally confessed it, I felt so much better, and I was able to move on. And it didn't really haunt me when I was married to Brandon for those 8 years. And it really didn't haunt me when I was a single mom for 10 years. But when I married Danny, and the only way that I can figure out why this happened is because I was out of that environment. When I married Danny, and it was this godly, wholesome, normal, natural relationship, I started having flashbacks for the first time in decades. And I didn't know what, I couldn't tell him. I mean, I could have. I mean, we've talked about it now, obviously, now that I've gotten therapy, and I'm now on a road to true inner healing and discovery. But at the time I was like, oh no, I can't, I've left everything that I've ever known, and this is all I have now. So like, I got to make this work. And so I remember talking to a friend in where I live now, and telling her, just burying my heart with her, saying, look, and I don't know where these flashbacks are coming from, where these memories are coming from. And it's really messing with me. And she said, she had also been abused. She shared her story with me, and she said, Melody, that was like God appointed for me to have her at that point. This was early in my marriage to Danny. She said, are there any open doors with your abuser, like on Facebook, or does he have your phone number or anything? And I was like, yeah. And the reason why is because we were taught to forgive and forget. Like, I was forced to be okay with this man and to act like nothing ever happened, as was my daughter, which is why I left there. I mean, really, ultimately, the way that whole situation was handled was just for another time. But so she said, Melody, you've got to cut him off. You've got to make sure he's blocked on Facebook. You block him from your phone. And do you know what, Syria? When I did that, it all stopped. I was like, whoa, that was pretty heavy right there. I still don't really understand how that dynamic works. But, and then interestingly enough, when I released the Closet Conversations video of me and my mom and my daughter talking about our sexual abuse, I didn't know that this person was on my Facebook public profile, and he saw the video, I guess, and he literally made a comment. And that's how I knew he was still on there. I was like,
he made a comment on the YouTube or Facebook?
On the Facebook. And he was like, yeah, forgiveness is key or something like that. I was like, get the hell. I was like, how do I block him off my public page? I was like, get the hell away from me.
Oh my God.
Yeah. Yeah. So anyway, yeah, that was a very, very destructive time. I just am so thankful that I finally confessed it, because this is really important. When I finally got it out, like I would say within 6 months, Syria, and I'm not joking, within 6 months of finally confessing that, I was no longer having the flashbacks. Like, I never thought, every day For 3 years, every day, I relived this trauma, these incidences. And I'm not talking about every once, like it became almost a daily thing where this man would corner me. And yeah, it was awful.
Well, I am so sorry you went through all that and endured all that. It lasted for about a year, you said?
Yeah, it just lasted a year. Yeah. Thank God. Because I
I
made him stop. I just was like, I want to have a normal relationship with Brandon, and you cannot do this to me anymore. Like, leave me the heck alone.
For sure. Let's just go back a little to where I sorry, I just had a couple questions.
Yeah.
Did you say did they end up after it came out what happened? Did they keep living there for a while or were they sent off right away?
They were forced at that time. Our church was meeting in Houston on
That's
Rogerdale.
right.
And there were already a few people like Brandon and others that had apartments right down the road from the church. So they were forced to go find one as well and get off campus right away.
Well, at least that part's good. Even though
Yeah.
he still
Oh no, he
he
was not
shouldn't
allowed.
have he shouldn't
He
have
was,
brought him back into your life, but at least he wasn't on
yeah,
campus
he
too long.
wasn't there for much longer. I remember a few services that they were there and then they were gone. Yeah.
Crazy. That's the whole dynamic of what would go on. This
Oh
sexual
yeah.
abuse went on in so many households, whether it was coming from, there was y'all's household, which I think it probably started in.
Hmm.
You have 8 brothers and sisters, is it?
Yes.
I
I'm
always
the
get it's
oldest
like
of
8
9.
or 9 or almost 10. I don't know. It's a lot.
Yeah.
But there's victims and predators. So it's two-sided, but like that I feel like kind of started within that family and it like bled out to the rest of the community where
Yep.
these things were talked about. I mean not talk well, these things were done, and then they were either they would go to eldership or about it or something, and then it was just all covered over time
Right.
and time
Time and
again.
time and time and time and time and time again. I was threatened when Sarah, my daughter, came and told me that one of somebody in the family had molested her, and she held it in for a couple years because she was petrified. And when I thought I was going to kill this person, I wanted to kill this person. I was so angry, and I remember calling my dad and just like, I'm calling the cops. And oh no, I was threatened. I was like, you cannot call the cops. This will ruin my marriage. It'll ruin my ministry. And, as a daughter who played into his whole victim mind control tactic, you get used to do everything that you do is to make him look better. And when it begins to go against your own conscience, which is what I started happening with me the last couple years that I was there. Well, actually, even when Brandon and I were together, like there were, I think you were going to ask me about red flags even back then. Yeah, I mean, there were definitely red flags, but like there was always some kind of justification for everything, and you just want to believe you're trained to believe the best. Believe the best.
Love believes the best.
Love covers a multitude of sins. Yeah, I mean, he just twists scripture to his advantage
Yep.
every chance he gets. And yeah, so
Yeah, it's crazy because it just definitely all bleeds out into the rest of the community and everything, and just so sad.
I feel like because there were several incidences of sexual abuse that originated from my family, that he felt he had to cover everybody else's because he covered his, and you know what I'm saying?
Yeah, that would make sense, but I think that might be some aspect of it, but also I think he just wanted his ass covered because it ultimately would fall on
On
him.
him.
Yes, the person that did the abuse, but I mean, it's under you have a community of people under your leadership and they're doing everything you say. It's like,
Right, and you gotta keep everybody at bay, and the less they know, the better.
for sure. That's why a big thing was like you couldn't tell anybody else. I'm assuming you couldn't really tell anybody else
About what?
about the assault.
My assault or
Yeah.
Sarah's?
Well, both. You
Oh,
probably couldn't like speak about it to really anybody.
there was never an atmosphere for, a person's emotions to be, validated and dealt with. And that's one thing that I want to be sure to say on this, Syria, is that that place is lacking the key ingredient besides, twisting scripture. They also have never had a certified licensed counselor that is like doctorate, has a doctorate, has a, just having a certification in biblical counseling is not enough to deal with people who are coming in broken, sexual abuse, physical abuse, all kinds of abuse. They never talk about these. They won't even let them talk about it. Like the only platform that they offer for counseling is you did this wrong. And this is what the word of God says. Now go memorize scripture and go do all of these things to make up for this bad thing that you did. That is not therapeutic. That is not counseling. That is not therapeutic. That is damaging. And they are missing. I remember being married to Brandon.
One thing I do want to know is because you kind of made it sound like you were into him at the beginning.
Oh
Um,
no, I loved him. I was
oh,
very much.
okay. I didn't know if it was like you guys were in love or if it was like
No,
forced upon or.
no, it wasn't forced. And here's the crazy thing. The day before I married Brandon, my dad was trying to talk me out of it.
Mm. I thought he really liked him or something. It
He
seems
did.
like,
He liked him after I tied the knot. He had no choice.
yeah, for sure. Okay.
But even then, he was, so controlling. But and you know, I know, see, I was told by my grandmother that even my uncle, my dad's brother who was at my wedding, leaned over to my grandmother at the reception of mine and Brandon's wedding and said, "They're not going to make it. She's not in love with him." Now, I was like, "What?" But I understand what he was saying. I absolutely married for the wrong reasons. I mean, I justified it in my mind. He was an evangelist. I was a worship leader. We did make a good ministry team, but we had so many words from the Lord that y'all are not compatible. And we just ignored them, ignored them, ignored them. Oh yeah. That was my escape. I knew if I could just get married, I wouldn't, he would be my authority now, not my dad. I wanted so badly to get out of, I wanted somebody else to protect me. And since Brandon was the only candidate, because we weren't allowed to date anyone outside of that place.
There's
Right.
no freaking options.
Yeah, no options other than somebody that was brainwashed there. So they too could be controlled.
Yeah.
So yeah, I remember dating this guy that I met in Colorado, and great Christian boy. And we went on a few dates, and Brandon and I weren't really that serious. I guess we were taking a break or whatever. And so I remember he wanted me to go to a Rockets game with him, and he called, and um, I think I was 17, 18, 17 maybe. I think it was 17 or 18. And so I was like, well, hold on. I gotta ask my dad. And so I asked him, and my dad, and I had just put the phone down like this. I hadn't like put it on hold or mute or anything like that. I just put it down here so he heard no, actually, I don't know if he heard anything. I basically just got back on the phone and told him exactly what my dad said. And he got so mad because my dad goes, "You've been spending a lot of time with that guy. I think that's enough. I mean, I think that's really obsessive." And I was like, and so I told him, and he's like, "What?" I mean, it so blew his mind. Like, He lived in Houston. I lived out here in the cow pasture in the middle of nowhere. It's not like we saw each other every day. Anyway, it was so crazy. No, we were not allowed. So anyway, Brandon and I got married, and we were really happy married. He was very involved. He was the head of the outreach team, and he would travel a lot. And I remember, and it's really important for me to say that Brandon and I today have a very great relationship. He is currently incarcerated, and he will hopefully be getting out this spring. But our two kids and he and I, God has helped us forgive each other of everything. And that's a choice that we made because we don't want to live in the past, and we don't want to have that kind of stuff in our hearts, and I've always been really careful with my kids because I was forbidden to have a relationship with my mom after she left. I always said I'm never going to do that to my kids. And even after Brandon left, after we got divorced, and he was not in a good way, I would not keep them from him. Now, I was scared at times for them to be in his care because I knew he was using again. But I had to, and if I felt like if he would show up like he would sometimes at 2, 3 in the morning, 8 hours late to get the kids, I'd be like, you guys don't have to go with him if you don't feel safe, because that kind of worried me. He lived 2 hours away, and he would show up at 2, 3 in the morning, and I knew something wasn't right, but I if the kids wanted to go with him, and I could tell he wasn't that out of his mind and able to drive home, then I would. And I mean, I had to trust God with those kids, but I was not going to keep them from their dad because of how it affected me and my siblings' lives being cut off from my mom. And she suffered so much, and I will honor her till the day I die because she just left and kept her mouth quiet and went on with her life, and was tricked into selling her rights to my 3 younger siblings. And it was just a horrible, horrible situation. So I just said, never, it would have to be really, 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 really bad for me to keep my kids from it because that's their dad, like it or not, that's their dad. So Brandon and I, things started getting bad with us, unsettled, I should say. He was traveling a lot.
Can I just set, I'm sorry, can I just set a picture real quick? Because I just wanted to explain to everybody what y'all's dynamic was within the church, especially with like Brandon being, he, like you said, he was the, one of the outreach directors of this team of group of people, which we've already talked about this on other podcasts and stuff. So, which me and my sister were also on this team. So Brandon was like a second dad to us as we were traveling so much throughout the years. My dad was in and out, like other girls' dads were just in and out. So he became like an older brother figure, to just all that kind of stuff. So the dynamic you guys were playing within the church was like within leadership roles, whether it was his or
we were out front. We were the ones that everybody really associated with in public, especially. Now, on campus also, because he became an elder as well eventually. And but yeah, I mean, it's crazy.
Yeah. So just as kind of place of leadership going on and everything. So, in all of our eyes, we didn't know kind of, obviously not everybody puts in a marriage, you're not going to put all your stuff out there. But it was like, we really looked up to you guys and everything. And so, there was a point where things started to go south in y'all's marriage and everything. And I don't know how much in detail you want to go into that.
Yeah, no, I don't mind. I want people to know the truth, Syria. I don't want there to be any questions. I don't want there to be, and here's the thing, I made a lot of really bad decisions, and I don't have, I don't care what people think anymore. I did what I did, and I regret a lot of the things that I did. I wish I could go back in time and change a lot, but I can't. And I know that God's forgiven me. Brandon's forgiven me. That's really that's the most important, is that, that God and Brandon have forgiven me for choices that I made. But it's also important for people to understand, that, these dynamics were at play, and there was so much pressure on us to do so much. Like, we couldn't have our own lives. It was all about the ministry. Every freaking moment. There was no life outside of that place. And we were told there wasn't. So he was really taken off with the StraightWay team, which is what it was called at the time, and doing a lot of school presentations all over. He was getting really, you guys were really, it was an awesome thing that started. I mean, it started a long time ago before y'all, but it just kept growing and growing and growing. And when Brandon had it, it really exploded because y'all got the grant from the state of Texas, and we were able to double our efforts and have 2 teams and all this. And Brandon would come home with these scratch marks on his arms, and I'd be like, what is that? And he'd say, oh, it's just me and the girls, playing around and scratching me and stuff. And I was like, now think about my insecurity with what I went through as a young person. Any association with a man touching a teenager, like, to me, was like, that shouldn't be happening. You know what I mean? But then he's my husband. And I was like, I'm not okay with that. I'm not okay with you getting that close to girls, especially when I'm not there. And you sure as heck shouldn't have marks on your arms from how rowdy y'all got. Like, that's just kind of weird. But he wouldn't, he just kind of played it off like, I guess in his mind it was innocent, and it may have been, but my insecurities were screaming at me at that time, like, no. And so because he wouldn't stop that behavior, and because, he wasn't, I was like, I remember, Syria, do you remember he would share his testimony in these churches all over, and like, he would get to the point of talking about introducing me, and he was like, I married my pastor's daughter. Here's this ex-crack addict, and look what I got. And I just felt like I was his little trophy.
Yeah.
I was his trophy that he won for being such a good little boy and for proving himself for 8 years. And because there was such a crazy dynamic happening, as there always is in places like this, in cults, we weren't whole. We weren't well. He had not done the soul therapy on himself when he went to the program, because the program doesn't offer that. And so he was broken. I was broken. We were trying our best. And I just remember literally in my mind saying, you know what? If this is what being a good girl for Jesus got me, I literally, I saved myself for marriage. Thank God my abuser did not take away that from me, that one aspect. And I gave it to him. And if this is what living for Jesus, I don't want it. Like, it was a life that I was not happy, and an opportunity presented itself, and I consciously made the decision to have an affair on Brandon. And it was not good at all, as far as that choice, because it was the wrong choice. There's no justification. There's no excuse. You should never be unfaithful. I don't care what they're doing. Then leave or do something. You know what I'm saying? But don't. Cheating is just the worst thing ever. And I did it. And I thankfully it was short-lived. I was exposed. You can't really do a whole lot in that community without somebody seeing you.
For sure.
So I admitted to it, and I was done at that point. Sarah was like 1.5 years old. Cade wasn't even thought of at this point. And I remember having a very hard heart and saying, I don't want to be in this marriage anymore. And everybody, they called me over in the middle of the night, had all the elders and their wives in my dad's house. They reamed me and reamed me and reamed me for hours and hours. And I would not, I just kept just like this, like hard cold, like, you're not going to change my mind. I mean, I was not going to do this anymore. And then I don't know what happened, Syria, about 4 a.m., literally 4 a.m., I just broke and realized what I'd done was wrong and repented and genuinely wanted to do the right thing. And I didn't see Brandon for a few days because guys were ministering to him, dealing with him. Of course, he was very upset, as he should have been. And he had a choice. He had an opportunity to walk away from that moment. I don't know what all was said to him. I don't know if they said, you have to make this work. I don't know. I just know that we made a decision to come back together and try to make it right. And I promised him that I would not communicate with this man if he tried to reach out to me. That man was made to leave immediately, literally escorted from a school presentation.
I didn't know that was why. I mean, I knew but I didn't know that's why he left.
Yeah,
Wow.
they, yeah, that was so abrupt. Anyway, I did what I said I was going to do, and I turned my heart back to him, and I wanted to do the right thing. And then we got pregnant with Kate, um, and then a lot just started going downhill. He started really abusing prescription drugs, and that was okay to do, I guess, because my dad had been doing it for so long, and other people in the community were also abusing prescription drugs. I was so naive to the whole drug world. Like, I didn't know what signs to look for or anything. I just knew that things were not, partying was becoming a big thing. People were getting really, really drunk, and a lot of just not good. I mean, a lot of sexual immorality was surrounding me. I was seeing elders doing things with other women.
Did
And at
that
this
lead,
point, huh?
sorry, did that lead into, were there, you don't have to go into much detail about this, but were there other affairs that happened, or was he?
Yes, there were definitely other emotional, and one got very physical affair with me. And it was like I was so like caught up in this whirlwind. I mean, Syria, I look back on that time in my life, and I can't even believe the horrific things that I did. I mean, it's like I'm talking about another person, but yet I take full responsibility because I understand where I was at the time, what was happening. Like I said, there's no justification for any of it. But it was like we were just getting swept up into this tornado, this funnel that was just like, it was so out of control, Syria. It was so out of control. I remember texting like 3 guys at one point and not wanting to do it. Like, why am I doing this? I don't want to be doing that. And I couldn't stop.
Hmm.
And
Were
anyway,
they all at the center or outside the center?
yeah, for the most part, yeah. I think there was one that wasn't, but maybe not. They were all there. They were all there. They were all very much part of what was going on. Yeah, and it was mostly emotional, but at the same time, one did get very physical and ended up really bad. And so much I have weighing on me every day
Hmm.
that
What would
I
you say? I know, trying to find my wording here because I don't want to come across as I at all as like aggressive or anything like that. But during this time, there was really horrible mistakes that were made, and not just the people you were having affairs with, but also their families or whatnot were also hurt as well. I mean, what would you say to that? And how, I mean, I know you're not the same person now currently, and there are things that you are coming, a lot of things you are coming to terms with. I mean, but what would you say to that, to these people that are probably still hurt and dealing
No,
with?
I don't blame you for hating me. I don't blame you for not wanting to have anything to do with me. I wouldn't either. Um, like, I'm so sorry. Like, I don't know what the hell I was doing and thinking. I was sucked into a really bad place of deception and justification, thinking I don't know what I just I it was all wrong. It was so wrong. It was so wrong, Syria, and I'm just I know that there's nothing that I can really say, except that I'm sorry, like, and please forgive me, and I pray that God blesses you and prospers you and heals you. Sorry.
um you know, I think it just starts there. um these kind of topics are not easy, and I, in my head, all week I've been trying to come, I feel like I'm in between two perspectives here of talking with you and knowing your side, but then also knowing the side of some really
Yeah,
horrible things that happened.
yeah.
And I know some of these things, I won't go into detail, but it just, like I said at the beginning, my main objective was to show a two-sided perspective here of why these actions came to be, and it doesn't justify
I'm not gonna
anything.
act like I know all the answers why, because
Yeah,
it's so
no,
crazy. It's so
it's
crazy. I don't think anybody can wrap their mind around it. Like, you know what I'm
it's
saying?
yeah, and it, I mean, these things are, are 10, 15, 20 years ago, but I know that they can still play a role in people's lives. But all that to
Absolutely.
say, just showing a two-sided perspective here, and just where you're coming from and everything. And now speaking to you now, I mean, it just has, wow. I'm just like I said, just kind of in astonishment. I mean, whenever I was there as a younger kid or teenager or whatever, I was scared shitless of you and like people like Jonathan who had such big personalities. And like I'm the opposite of that. I'm very like kind of a little more reserved when it, and
Yeah.
so, it just like, but yeah, just like kind of speaking to you throughout the past couple of months, I'm like, wow, there's a difference. And so that's what I hope people can start to see and understand. And coming out of something like this takes years of decompression and um, opening your heart to that there is a whole nother reality out there, and that God is not the God that we knew
That's right.
there. And so anyways, all that to say that, during y'all's marriage and everything, obviously there was a lot that went wrong and everything. And
Yes, and the last stitch effort that my dad, because you have to, like we said earlier, because we were the, like, Melody and Brandon, Melody's this, Brandon's this, and we were, the ones like going out and making money for the place and all of this. It was like he had to do something to keep us from falling apart, because when all of the multiple, like when the other emotional affairs and the other things at the very end was happening, I think I justified him because I found out that he had also been unfaithful to me. So in the back of my mind, I was like, well, this isn't a real covenant. Like, we're just playing this game. Like, this is all for show anyway. Like, you know what I'm saying? And so, but anyway, his last stitch effort was to send us to, this is really important because I find this was something. There's a book called The DNA of Relationships by Dr. Gary Smalley that is amazing. And I always tell people, you've got to read this book, because I had never, all the counseling that I had known my whole life was like, you're doing the wrong thing and you're going to go to hell, blah, blah, blah. And I never had true, healthy, safe therapy. And so he found out that Gary Smalley has several institutes all over that you can get marriages that are on the rocks. They can pick what kind of therapy they want to do. And so he chose for us. He paid and chose for us. I mean, we had no control over even our own marriage. Like, we were going to do what he wanted us to do. And so I guess he felt like, here, I'm offering you this. You've got to take it. This wonderful act of love. And so I went kicking and screaming. I was so done with the marriage. I could not stand Brandon at this point. I hated his guts. I literally could not stand him. He was sleeping with a gun under his pillow. He put his arms around me, almost choked me to death one night. I remember running out in the middle of the night, running to Judy Haynes' house, because she was the only safe person that I felt had God. And he was just not in a good mental state. And I obviously wasn't either. And so I went kicking and screaming. I do not want to go to this thing. And we had to read the book before we went, because there was certain terminology that they would use in the sessions that we needed to understand and all this. And I just remember reading the book going, it empowered me so much, Syria, because it all focused on me. It wasn't trying to restore my relationship with Brandon. I was the one that needed to take a good look at me, and he needed to do the same inside himself, right? And the problem with what they do out there in Hungerford is, it's like, if there's a marriage on the rocks, they're like, you just need to obey what Jesus says. You just need to obey what the Bible says. You just need to do this. You just need to do that. And they have no clue as to how to really get to the heart of a person and their issues. And that's why I came on this show, Syria. Ultimately, this is one of the biggest reasons I agreed to come on here, is because I last year started therapy finally for myself. And that is what brought me to the place of really being able to see, because when I left there almost 9 years ago, I went from one survival mode to the next. And so I was like, oh, I've got this new life and just moving forward. And you got to get used to this new life and this new world and this new marriage and these new kids and all of this. And you're just going full speed. It's almost like one of those cartoons, like where they're running in place and they've got this huge cart behind them with all of this weight, and they may be able to make a few steps, but then once they start trying to run, I mean, like, it's so heavy they can't go anywhere. And that's really what happened to me. I slowed down last year and had an opportunity to get some help, and I took it, and now I can't help but tell the truth, because I see it for what it is. And so we go to this place, and I was so mad that I had to be there, Syria. And I remember my dad took us out to eat before they dropped us off, because him and Jennifer drove us up there. And I was sat out on the bench like a little 5-year-old. I was like, I just walked outside. I was so upset. And he comes out there, my dad, and he said, Melody, you're strong enough psychologically to just go in and do this thing and just glean from it what you can. And maybe you'll be able to help somebody else one day with the information that you get. That was actually God speaking through him. Little does he know, if God can speak through a donkey, he can speak through David Kirk. But anyway, I was like, yeah, you're right. I can do that. So I kind of like pushed the emotions aside, and I was like, okay, I'm just going to go in there with this strong mental, like, let me understand what's happening here kind of thing. Well, what ended up happening is that we got down to some real issues in there. First of all, the two counselors, we were with 4 other couples. They could not believe that we lived in the environment that we lived in. They were like, that's your problem. I mean, it was obvious to them. They were like, wait a minute, this man is your dad, he's your pastor, and both of y'all's employer? Like, his fingers are in everything. Y'all don't have any kind of privacy? And we're like, no. And they're like, well, could you at least move off campus? Well, you know how it is. If you moved off campus, you were not really committed. And so anyway, by the end of the 3 days, we were actually holding hands. I mean, which was a miracle, because you have to understand, Syria, like, I was not willing to move forward with this marriage. And I saw a glimmer of hope because for the first time, Brandon got down to some real issues from his past. And it gave me hope to know, oh, there are some soft emotions deep down in there somewhere, because we'd gotten into this, just we'd gotten so hard and calloused, and so it was so ugly. It was so ugly, the people we had become. And I saw, wow. And so we get back with my dad. We're driving home. We're so excited to tell him about these like key principles that we learned about taking responsibility for our own actions, and that nobody can make you do anything else. You're choosing. He did not like that at all, because ding, 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 he would have to take responsibility for his. And all he ever does is blame other people for his problems. And so he shut us down. He shut it down. And at that moment, I thought, I mean, I remember thinking, if we could just get a house not on campus, what would that be like? We might actually be able to save our marriage. But no, it was all to save face for the ministry. No, what will people think if you move off campus? They can't really know.
Yeah.
I'll just leave it right there.
Yeah. Well, so it ended soon after.
It ended soon after that. All hell broke loose. I won't even get into all that. It was crazy, crazy, crazy. I was horrified. I was not supported by this. This was, so I was what, 30? I was 30 years old.
Did they
Had
not
never,
want you? I'm sorry. Did they not want you to get divorced?
um, I think because I had got, one day I went to my dad, and this was like a month or two before Brandon ended up leaving. I went to him because I had learned that he had, on a Mexico Valley trip, he had been unfaithful to me. And when I found that out, I found this out from the person who was with him when it and witnessed it.
Lordy Jesus.
I thought, well, the Bible says I don't have to stay married. I mean, like, he was so far out of it, and I knew I was out of it, but I was still trying to put on the good girl face or whatever, do the right thing. And I remember going to my dad and Jennifer's house, and I was like, nobody's going to change my mind. Nobody's going to change my mind. I'm divorcing this man. I have biblical grounds to divorce him. And my dad's just that good that he convinced me. This is what he said. He said, Melody, I got to tell you something. We happen to know some things that Brandon's been doing, and we can no longer have him work here. So we're going to have to tell him that he's going to have to get a real job out in the real world. What do you think's going to happen when he gets a real job? And I was like, he's never really had a real job. The ministry is all he's ever known since he was 17 years old as an ex-crack addict. He's abusing drugs right now. He's not going to have the accountability. He's going to be out in the real world. He's going to fall flat on his face. I mean, he's not going to make it. He's like, then let him fall on his face. He said, I'm worried about your reputation. Even though you do have biblical grounds to leave him, everybody always sees who left who. Let him leave you. That was the hardest decision that I think, one of the hardest decisions I've ever made, was going back to him, knowing he was sleeping with a pistol under his gun. He was abusing. He was not in his right mind. He was being very verbally abusive to the women in the office that were working for him, including my grandmother. I mean, it was not good. It was very toxic. We weren't getting along. And then one day they called him in and confronted him on some things. And next thing I know, he's cleaned out all of his clothes, and he's taken off in a brand new, fully loaded, leather package Trailblazer that we just got, that I was so proud of. And I thought, oh my God, he's going straight to the bank. I know it. And before I could get there, he'd taken all the money out of the bank. and left me and the kids with a little 96 Honda standard Civic. Even the windows didn't roll down, but I didn't have a car. It became a blessing in disguise because I didn't have a car payment. He left me with like $50,000 worth of credit card debt and this house payment. And I've worked for the ministry my whole life, never been allowed to get a real job, never allowed to get an education. What the hell am I going to do now? And I was told, you got to go get a real job. And so I went to work at Nordstrom Houston Galleria. And that was when I realized at 30 years old that I have lived in a bubble my entire life. And I was getting hit on every direction, and I didn't know how to handle it. I was like, oh my God, it was a nightmare. It was a really hard 10 years of being a single mom, because I ended up moving off of the main campus and down the road because I didn't want Brandon to take me to court and say that my kids were on this campus with all these drug addicts, and some of them sexual predators, some of them come straight from prison. And so I wanted to eliminate that. Like, I'm like, you're not taking my kids from me. So I moved down the road and we lived there for 10 years, and it got really bad, Syria. Our living conditions got really bad. The trailer, there were holes in the floor. You could see straight through down to the ground.
What trailer were you in?
Margaret's old trailer.
Oh, wow. Okay. Okay.
Yeah. And a lot of people, she had rented or let other families lived there because she was by herself at some point. And so there was a lot of traffic. The carpet was, and I remember even my dad offered, he'd gotten word of how bad it was. And he was like, well, y'all can come live with us. I was like, nope.
Was he living in the big house yet?
Yeah.
Okay.
And most of the kids were gone. There was plenty of room, but I would have rather stayed in that broken down, at least have some kind of privacy. That was the only privacy I could have. I was sure as heck not going to move in with him and his chaotic world. No.
At that point, were you starting to realize how messed up things were and how crazy DK was?
I remember, so there's one thing that he would always do. Anytime I would be asked to come minister at another church or another place, I would get called in and he would have this talk with me, and he would say, now listen, you don't receive any prophetic words from anybody else, and you do not receive counsel or instruction or the word of God. The word of God comes from this pulpit for you and this pulpit only. And I'd be like, I would get so sick to my stomach every time I'd have to have this conversation, because I actually have a prophetic nature, which got squelched and squashed back in my 20s. And that's another story. But I was like, I knew that, like, God is everywhere. Like, I knew that. Like, and so I remember I had an opportunity to help build a church in New Orleans with my spiritual mom. They really wanted me, and I went to visit, and I felt the tug. I felt this tug on my heart, like, this would be really good for you and the kids. I mean, all I'd ever known is ministry, And I have to say that, even though it got crazy there, I always wanted to do the right thing. I had developed my own relationship with Jesus on my own, which, thanks to my dad, see, God used him again. He would always say, you need to go read the word. Well, guess what? I wasn't your typical kid. I did what he said, and I did read the word, and Jesus appeared to me there. Like, so I had my own relationship with Jesus. And so, like, towards the end of my single mom life, I really, the alcohol abuse, his marital problems, I was the one he came to when him and Jennifer were having issues, and, oh, you're my rock. I mean, and listen, he would tell me, I can't even tell Jennifer some things. You're the only one I have that I can really confide in. That was his way of keeping me there.
That is the ultimate manipulation of somebody, and the most narcissistic type of person.
Yep.
And that leads into leading a cult.
That's how he keeps his subjects, you got to be on his side. You got to support him, and he does nothing wrong. Everybody else is at fault. So you want me to just tell briefly how Danny came in the picture?
No, yeah, let's yeah. So you guys are your marriage is ended to Brandon and
Yeah,
everything. You're in the
I was
midst
10
of
years. Yeah, our divorce was final in 2006. So so I went single mom for 10 years, regular job. I was working a lot of jobs. I was gigging. It got to the point, Syria, where I was working a full-time job at Nordstrom. And on Monday through Saturday, or on Thursday, Friday, and Saturday, I had to take the 8 to 5 shift with driving from Hungerford all the way to Houston in traffic, work traffic. You know how it is. I'd have to leave 2 hours early just to get to work on time. Then on Thursday, Friday, and Saturday, I would gig at night. Then I would lead worship for him, go back to work. Like, I hardly ever saw my kids, but I was working, working, working just to support myself. I wasn't getting any child support from Brandon. He was messed up. And occasionally I would, but so then, yeah, I did a couple online dating things because we weren't allowed to. There's freaking
can I ask something real quick? What because we were not as I mean, my end of my time there, you weren't allowed to date outside the
right,
church. So
right.
how come you were getting online? Was that allowed? Or did you
No, I
just
mean,
like
no one knew I was doing it. No.
okay, so you did it
Um,
just
and I would go out with other guys from work, after go have a drink and, I would do that occasionally. And then I did start talking to, there were several guys that I was talking to that weren't a part of that place, but I would always tell them whenever they wanted it to like get serious, I'd say, but you don't understand. Like, and they're like, why can't we have a relationship? I'm like, that's when it really started becoming real to me. Like, this is not right. Like, I'm not even they're not understanding what I'm saying. So there must be something wrong here because they were intelligent. Like, one was an engineer. He was, one worked for Homeland Security and got promoted to Washington, D.C. I mean, we're talking about very educated men and wealthy. And like, I had a lot of chances, but I couldn't pursue it because, and one, I finally got to come to church. A couple actually came to church and they liked it. I mean, they just saw the church service
so
aspect.
they
And because
drove all the way out there to
one
attend
did, yeah,
service?
one did. And at one point we were meeting in Rosenberg, so they went to that one. Yeah, it was anyway. So I had done some online dating, had some bad experiences, was not a fan of it at all. And I saw these ads for Christian Mingle, and I was like, I was just curious to see if it was really different, being that it was a Christian dating website. And it was actually. I was like, oh, this is cool. I don't have to tell my real name. So they can't Google me and find out that I'm like this singer musician, because I felt like a lot of guys liked me for the wrong reasons, and I was able to get on there and create a profile that like shared my beliefs and my heart and who I was here. And so, yeah, Danny and I met on Christian Mingle, and I literally, the first time I heard his voice on the phone, I knew he was the one.
Wow. Wow.
Yeah. And he had been engaged to a girl. When he was in Bible school, he was engaged to a girl that I used to compete in. They now call them fine arts competitions with the Assemblies of God, but back then it was teen talent. And I had a big crush on her brother, and we would compete against each other. And he was engaged to her.
That's crazy. I mean, like small world there. Him coming from like a kind of knowing about the Assemblies of God, and then you having that background. I mean,
Yeah,
wow.
yeah,
Uh,
yeah. We really hit it off. Yeah,
so I mean, well, thank goodness you did because
yeah,
I think that part. I think there were two parts that you were able to get out when you started seeing red flags and stuff, and that was partly mostly Danny, but also the things that happened with your daughter and stuff,
yeah.
and I'm
It
sure
was like
all of
an
that put
accumulation.
together.
Yep,
Yeah.
accumulation of things. It was like God's progressive timing. I think because I tell people this, I know when people go there, they get brainwashed,
Mm-hmm.
but I wasn't brainwashed. I was hardwired from day one
Yeah.
to be a certain way, think a certain way, act a certain way, talk a certain way, not talk a certain way, all of this. And I think that God had to do it. He had to slowly, progressively, as he continues to do to this day. If I saw everything at once, I'd probably die. But
Well, it's
slowly.
taking in, yeah, it's taking in a lot of information and a lot, decompressing a lot that you're just, it gets overwhelming. I know for me, even doing each episode that I've done, I've had to take breaks and stuff because it's like, it's so emotionally
Yeah.
draining because you're so invested into it and story after story. So I get it coming out.
I mean, when I watched your show, Syria, I wasn't sure about coming on the show at one point, And even when I left there, people would say, "Oh, Melody, you got to tell your story. You need to write a book, blah, blah, blah." And I'd be like, "I know. I'm sure that day will come." And then when I was first approached, when we first talked several months ago, I was like, still very much, and even talking to Troy, I even my perception of everything has changed since then. It's continually unraveling. I mean, if you think about a trash compactor or whatever they contract, whatever those compactors are, and it just squishes it down, squishes it down, squishes it down. I mean, in order to actually pull apart every piece of trash that gets compounded in there, it takes time and it takes effort. And so even since then, my eyes have been open because I remember saying, "No, I'm never going to come out and say anything as long as my dad's alive. I'm not going to say anything because I want to honor him." And the therapy that I have endured and gone through has made me realize that I'm hurting myself by not talking about it and by not exposing it. And I'm hurting others by not validating their stories. When I heard every single one, Syria, yours, Hannah's, Troy's, Chanel's, Kaylin's, all of them crushed me because I didn't know a lot of what was going on when I was younger. I didn't know Chanel went through what she went through. Having been a single mom and she had so many kids and I only had two. I think of people like Lisa. She's one of my heroes. Like, oh my gosh, these people suffered. They had to cut their relationships off with their children if they didn't abide by the rules of that place. And I'm like, what is happening here? This is not a good place. This is not a place of restoration. This is a place of division. And the Bible says, mark those who cause division. This is not a work of God. Okay, I need everybody to understand this place is not a work of God. There are people there who are blinded and they're deceived like I was for so long, but they are forbidden to watch your show, Syria. They are forbidden to talk to me. When I left there, I was immediately lied about, shunned. It was the most traumatic experience I've ever experienced in my life. This was my family. This was my friends who I lived with for 40 years. And I remember when I made it known that I was going to be leaving. I remember texting one of the women that is still out there to this day, and she and her husband have faithfully served for so long and are precious people. And lots of kids that they raised out there. And they've had their share of issues, but somehow they're still there. It just blows my mind. But anyway, I remember I had taken over working in the kitchen on multiple levels, on multiple times, to help out. And so I worked closely with this person. And I just remember texting her and saying, "I love you and I'm going to miss you." And then I got a text from somebody who used to be my best friend. Sorry. And she said, "Stop texting people. You're confusing them." Yeah, I'm confusing them because I was being lied about. They were given a narrative by my dad and told the lies about me. Oh my God, it was so awful. It was so awful. I remember being harassed on my phone, at work, and it was a nightmare. It was a living nightmare. And I have to thank Rebecca Morales, who you also interviewed on this show, and she opened her home to me and my kids, and because I had to get out of there. I had to get out of there. It was awful. It was awful. And I haven't really healed completely from that, Syria. And I remember Danny he couldn't believe it. He couldn't believe that this was happening, that these people treated me this way. And I'm so thankful for the Moraleses, and I pray that God blesses them so much for opening their home to me and my kids until I got to move to the Austin area, because Danny and I, we wanted to do things the right way. So we didn't live together until we were married. And I'm so sorry that all of you experienced, but I gotta say that the curses that they speak on you are not stronger than God's love for you. And I just want people to know that God is real and he's loving, but he is nothing like what they portray him out there. Nothing. And everything that they do out there is backwards and perverted and damaging and damnable. It's awful. Like, it needs to be shut down. It really needs to be shut down. And I never thought I would ever say these things, Syria.
I know.
But I'm tired of the lies. I'm tired of things just being hidden. I'm tired of it. Somebody's got to stand up. And I didn't want to come on the show because it is my dad. And I don't hate him. I'm not bitter at him, but I want him to change. I want him, and I know that's probably never going to happen. And that's what breaks my heart, because I have siblings that are broken individuals. They're having a really hard time in life, and they've had a really hard time in life. They didn't have the sound foundation that I had as the firstborn when my grandparents were in the picture. I can't even imagine what they lived in, because I had to get out of there. When he remarried and I was 20, I left the house and went to move in with Deborah. And I don't know what they experienced, but from what I've heard, it just was not very good.
Yeah. Yeah. I've heard some really horrible stories from some of them about that time. And it's just awful. And I'm so sorry how traumatic that was whenever you left and trying to leave maybe in the right way. I know I tried to leave in the right way.
I did.
But
I did.
Yeah, I tried to leave.
I told him, he's like, you need to. I mean, it was so crazy. And I think if I have the platform, I'm going to say it, because maybe somebody from out there is listening, and they can know the truth for once. But I wanted to have just a daughter-father relationship. I did not want to be treated like a worship leader. But the elders were always brought into everything. Everything. There was no privacy in the Kershke home. None. Every time there was an issue with one of us, the elders had to be brought in. There was no family, organic dynamic happening. That was foreign to me. So I first went to my dad, just thinking, surely he will understand. At that point, I didn't want to leave. When I first met Danny, I wasn't going to leave. I just wanted to date somebody that wasn't raised there.
Yeah.
So I was trying to get his permission at 40 years old. And he was like, Well, I mean, I don't really have a problem with it, but he needs to read this book and 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 this book to make sure that he's theologically on the same page, because you're going to take over this ministry one day. And that's when I had an aha moment. And I was like, I said to myself, I don't want to take over this ministry. I've never felt called to take over this ministry. As a matter of fact, I've missed out a lot of opportunities on what my calling should have been, because I've stayed committed to you in supporting you, and that's not what I want. So I had to be real with myself first. And then I was like, no, I'm not doing that. And so when I put my foot down and stood up to him for the first time in my life, that's when he was like, okay, well, we got to bring the elders in. Okay. So I sent a letter to all the elders and him, an email. Then this is how delusional this man is. Then he comes back and says, that's a little personal, don't you think? Why'd you involve the elders? Because you just told me that they needed to be involved. And so then he's like, well, we do want to sit down with you. Well, I had 3 other godly people, all pastors, that I was communicating with and running everything. I was channeling all the communications to them, because I was in such a crazy state of mind, thinking, I can't believe this is actually happening to me, that I was like, I knew I was emotionally out of control, and I was in shock that I was now being shunned by the same people that I used to shun with. I used to shun other people. It was just such a crazy dynamic. And so I was like, okay, at least these people, they're outsider. Actually, one minister was actually living in my dad's house at the time, but he was just there volunteering, and he's no longer there. So he knew exactly what was happening. And then the other 2 were in their own churches and other places. And they told me, you do not have to sit down with the elders, Melody. If God has told you to go, you just listen to God and you go. Well, that was forbidden. You can't hear God on your own. In a cult, in that place, only David Kurshke could say, God, thus saith the Lord. So that was foreign to me, but I trusted them. But I knew what was going to happen. I knew if I didn't try to leave, if I did not leave the right way, according to David Kurshke, that I would not have my friends anymore. And I didn't want that. And so I told my confidants, I said, I'm going to meet with the elders anyway. Even though I know I don't need to have the blessing of God on my life, I'm going to do it anyway, because y'all don't understand. Y'all don't know what I know, what's about to go down. So the meeting was scheduled for a Monday. Do you know that on Sunday after church, I had quit going to the services? I was still living down the road. I had not yet moved to Rebecca's yet, but I quit going to their church because I just couldn't be in there. After church, he called a church meeting, and I don't know what he said, but all of a sudden, Sunday night, nobody would talk to me. All these people who were my family, my brothers and sisters in God, and I loved them, they loved me. And I'll never forget, our kids went to bowling school, and the bus wouldn't come down to the center, so we had to drive a mile down the road to a gas station where the bus would pick them up. Well, I had to leave for work like at 5 a.m. sometimes to beat traffic, 5:30. So there were days that I couldn't drive my kids down there. So one of them, I'm not going to say his name, but one of the family men that lived on that property, would take my kids with his kids on the mornings that I couldn't do it. It was just like, that was the arrangement. Well, me knowing that something had just went down, because I could feel everybody was shunning me, and they wouldn't even talk to me. They wouldn't even look me in the eyes. I said, you know what? I better text this person and make sure that he doesn't leave my kids, like, because I need him to. So I text him. I was like, hey, just making sure that it's, that you're that my kids are riding with you in the morning. I didn't hear back from him for a couple hours. And then all of a sudden I get a text. This is what my husband, Danny, goes, "What?" The text said, "Your father has approved it."
Well, oh my God. He has deemed it worthy. Holy crap.
So I said, "No, I'm not meeting with the elders." He went behind my back. He lied about me. I know what he does. This is how he gets everybody on his side and makes them think bad of the person who's leaving so they can pray for them to come back to Jesus. And then I had to get the hell out of there, and thank the Lord the Moraleses opened their doors. So there was a few months there that I stayed until it was time for us to get married, and then I moved to Austin. So
Yeah. Well, thank goodness they were that in between stage and everything.
yeah,
I mean, so that story, like being shunned and all of that is what happened to almost everybody that left in the same scenarios. I mean, my
I know.
relationship with my mom was broken for years because my mom is the one that had to tell me to kick me out because the elders told her that. Person after person, I can think of one of my best friends, her younger brother at the age of 14 was dropped off at a bus and said, he wasn't doing what he was supposed to be doing. So he was dropped off at the age of 14 and left to be. And it was just shunned. You were in the wrong.
It
And
makes me so mad, Syria. It makes me
yeah,
so mad. And that's why, like, getting therapy, if anybody has not experienced like the real kind of therapy that is helps you progress in life and helps you, get to the root of things, I cannot encourage people enough to seek out, at least talk to somebody that you feel safe with, that you can talk about your story, because the longer you suppress it, and it gets more confusing, and you begin to feel not yourself anymore. I mean, that's what happened to me last year. I was like on the verge of a mental breakdown. I literally collapsed on the floor, and my husband said, "You need therapy." And I thought he was going to ship me off to a freaking nut house. No, because the
no, yeah,
emotions,
it's
like, I was beginning to see, and I was searching truth, and I was like, I knew that I didn't have to work. I didn't have to work for a period of time. And so then it was like God planned it. He was like, "Okay, now's the time." And boy, yeah, it's been almost 9 years since I left there, but I remember putting out an apology, sending an apology to Pam and Brenda shortly after I left there, wanting people to know how I was no longer aligned with them and how sorry I was for everything. But I didn't feel it like I feel it now
mm,
after therapy. And I will continue to be in therapy. I mean, you have to kind of take it in waves because it's so much,
mhm,
but it's such a therapeutic healing thing to be able to talk. Just talk about it.
for
Just talk about
sure. And that's
it, and
what,
have somebody validate you and say, "I am so sorry. That was wrong." And so me coming on here, I'm hoping to do that for anybody else, that, somebody did that for me. And if I can do that for somebody else and listen to them, just listen to their stories and feel with them what they felt. I mean, that's all I want to do for the rest of my life, is listen, because I've been so busy talking and saying the scripted things that I had to say. I wasn't allowed to be human. I wasn't allowed to feel. I wasn't allowed. And now that I'm in that mode, it's like, Syria, it's been life changing. It's been like, and I can't thank you enough for having this platform to let people tell their stories, because it's helping them, and it helped me to hear their stories. It brought it home even more and made me really feel what they felt, not only because I had experienced it, but because I got to hear it. You provided that platform for them. So thank you so much. I really thank you for it.
yeah, and it's not just helped me. I'm so glad people. It's also helped me as well, like you said, just being able to speak to someone. And I'm a huge advocate for therapy as well. It's if you can do it, then by all means do it. It
It's
does get
great. Yeah.
it does get pretty pricey, but
Yeah,
uh,
there's some free counseling out there, but like I said, sometimes I just sit and talk with my aunt. I'm at my aunt's house right now because I have lots of kids. So I had to go to a quiet place to do this interview. But sometimes we'll just sit and talk for hours. And she's such a good listener. Talk to somebody who will listen. And then if you need to take the next step, they can help you find the right person that is educated in the area of the psyche and the emotions and all of that. It's really an awesome, it hurts like heck at times. And it's really humbling for me, especially because I wasn't just a victim. I wasn't just a victim. I had become a perpetrator. So there's a lot that I have to constantly, I don't live in the past, but I never want to forget the past, only because it helps me stay on the level with real human beings that are
For
living
sure.
life. You know
And
what I'm
it's,
saying?
yeah. And when you know, one thing is like you are you being there, you yourself, you were just in such a place of leadership and everything, and such a, did you think that, or like look at yourself, I mean, you may not, it may not have been a thought process or anything, but like you were a little above everyone else, or a little,
Of course. Like I said,
yeah.
from 10 years old when I made my first album, even before that, I mean, as a child, I would be brought into churches to do their revivals, to do the special music for revivals at 8 years old. So I was already put on this pedestal. And so it was like, I just kept advancing up the ranks or something, and not meaning to. It just happened. Like, it was like, oh, well, now you're this. Now you're going to be over this. Now you're going to do this. And now you need to do this. And you need to go tell so and so. And Melody, you need to go do this. Like, it was not, I have so much respect for my mom's husband, Michael, I guess. I mean, I call him husband. They've been together for all these years because they wanted him to do stuff like following people and
Wait,
spying
what?
on people.
What?
Yes. Yes. Yes,
And
Syria.
he wouldn't do it? Wait, would he do it?
No.
Oh,
He
he
said,
wouldn't do it.
no. He said, I'm not doing
Holy,
that.
oh
He
my
would
God.
say, I don't care if David Kursky says. He goes, I'm not doing that. If they're doing something wrong, it's going to come out. Just let God
So
be God.
people were, okay. People were
This is,
spying,
of
probably.
course.
Oh my
I
God.
wouldn't be
I felt
surprised.
like,
I
holy
wouldn't be
crap.
surprised
I
if
would
there were
feel
cameras
like
in my own house that I didn't know about. Okay. I
I would
mean,
I would have these feelings of like, am I being watched? I mean, maybe it was never on me or anything, but like, is there people watching? What is happening here? But I never like,
no, they had cameras planted. They had GPS devices
oh
planted.
Jesus.
They
Okay.
had they
This
had
is
phones tapped.
definitely this is definitely a cult. That is cult
It sounds like
behavior.
Scientology, doesn't it?
It sounds like Scientology. Oh my God. Wow. I
Yeah.
didn't know that they were having like people follow. I'm assuming I kind of probably know who probably did some of that, because one of the end of, I'll tell you after, but one of the individuals after I had left showed up at, I was living with somebody that was had gone on and off there to the center,
Yeah.
and we were roommates, and this person showed up all of a sudden and was like looking for one of the kids or your siblings, but it was very strange and weird. It almost felt like he was trying to find some, like, more than just that person. It was odd.
Of
Anyways,
course. There's always
um
an agenda.
oh wow, okay, sorry, I'm just kind of like, wow.
No, you wouldn't believe the things I found out. I mean, I don't want to, I don't want to participate in gossip, but what I have told thus far is just the truth. It's not gossip. It's the truth. And it's to help people, not to harm people.
So yeah, you finally get out of there and everything, and it's been, you said, about 8-9 years that you have been out. You're coming to terms with all of these things and everything. What is, knowing that, like I said, you have 8 brothers and sisters. Most of them are out of there, but there are a couple that are still there. I mean, how do you come to terms with that? That knowing, I mean, I'm sure you have such love for all of them. It's your family, of course, but just knowing that family is still there or other siblings are just going through so much. I mean,
It's heartbreaking.
yeah.
It's heartbreaking because the two that are there are completely deceived, just like I was. I think that my sister doesn't agree with everything, but she's loyal to the core, and that's all she's ever known. And she's kind of got her own thing going there now. Like, she runs the place. And she has her own, fitness clientele, and she's got stuff that she does. I get it. But she's not happy. She's not happy. And what breaks my heart is that she's never been married, never had kids. Um, and she's a beautiful girl. I mean, she's got some issues, yeah, but we all do. And she won't talk to me now. Now that I've come out with my story, I've texted her several times. She won't respond. My dad's blocked me. Um, like, we have no communication with them whatsoever, and I don't know that we ever will. I have to protect my family, and I will not subject them to such dysfunctional people. So
For sure. I mean, I get it. I understand. I really hope that someday, especially your sister, would see the light of day.
I do too. I do too. It breaks my
Um,
heart. We've never been that close, Syria, like you and your sister. We wanted to, but we just have never been that close. And I think we've both desired to be, but for one reason or the other, we just have never been that close. So
yeah, man, it's crazy. If you were given the opportunity to kind of, well, I guess you said you've been blocked and stuff, and uh, if given the opportunity to say what you would really want to say to DK, what do you think you would say or try to get out? I mean, if you could even get a word out with him, you kind of can't. But if he was made to be silent for 2 minutes and you could get two minutes of words out,
that's never happened. But let's
given
just
the opportunity.
in a fantasy world, I would say I don't need you to do anything for me because I have found my own healing, and it is aside from you. Yes, you brought a lot of dysfunction and confusion and pain into my life by a lot of things. You also did some good things, but you hurt a lot of people. You have hurt a lot of people. You have damaged a lot of people. You have turned people away from God and not to God. And I don't know how you can call yourself a Christian, let alone a pastor, with more people that have been broken than people that have truly been healed. You need to seek God and ask him to open your eyes or go to therapy or something, because you have no idea. You have no, and maybe you do. I don't want to think that you do. I don't want to think that you intentionally set out to control people's minds. That is a horrific thought for me. I want to give grace. I want to give mercy. I want to give you a chance before you die to somehow like come to terms with things, something, at least one thing. Could you just admit one thing? One thing. Let's just start with one thing. Why don't we just start with listening? If you would listen to your children, let's just start with your family. You're never going to probably ever be able to say anything that would help anybody else, but your family, your children, start there.
Yeah. Wow. Wow. Man, thank you so much for being on and everything and doing this. Like I said, I know it can't be easy.
It's not easy, but I had so much peace, Syria. I have not sweated over this. I have not been nervous about this. I told you, you ask me whatever you want to ask me because the truth needs to be told and the light needs to prevail in the darkness. There's a lot of darkness. And as long as people don't talk, as long as they remain silent, the darkness will prevail. And I refuse to let the darkness prevail.
For sure.
That's just how I see it.
Yeah. And just getting more stories out there and everything,
Yes.
just like you said, and and bringing healing and everything. And man, it's a process of coming to terms with all of this stuff. And
Yes, it is.
and
Yes, it is.
yeah, I'm sure there's so many more stories and just so many more things we could talk about. I mean, I think we're going on like an hour and a half to 2 hours now.
Yeah, it's getting late.
But no, I mean, I would like to have you back on and stuff. I mean, discussing maybe other things. I mean, within the topic, but
Sure.
other stuff. But yeah, this is anybody dealing with either sexual assault, physical abuse, or anything's on those terms. The obviously therapy is the best thing, and for me, it's God too, but it's a mix of being able to speak with a community of friends, family, whoever it may be,
Absolutely.
getting it
Yes.
out there. I know for me, like I have a best friend who has been a godsend. I know God sent her to me about 8-9 years ago. Right. I was out for about, God, 2 or 3 years, I think. And like you said, I lost, those friendships were gone. I was like devastated, obviously. But God brought this person in my life and we became soulmates. That sounds really funny, but she became my soul sister. And to this day, we've cried, we've laughed, I mean, she's heard all this stuff and thinks it's just absolutely crazy.
Yep.
But she's been the person that's been there for me like the most just throughout life and everything. And so all that to say, just being able to have somebody you can communicate and talk with this stuff about, because you can forget about it, choose to forget about it and never speak about it again and move on with your life. Everybody has their own way of dealing with things. But I will
Yep.
say this, it eventually comes out in other areas of your life, whether you
Yes, it
it or
does.
not. It will portray through other areas. So
Mhm.
yeah, whatever
Yeah,
it
the
may
quicker
be.
you can get a handle on it, the better, because
For sure.
life has a
Yeah.
way of causing things to accumulate.
Yeah.
But
Yep. Yeah, like I said, thank you so much for being on. And I really hope people give this a chance to actually listen to and everything, because there's definitely a lot of insight into everything that has been spoken and stuff. So thank you so much. And yes, we will end
thank
this.
you,
I'm
Syria.
still going to stay on, but I'm just going to end the recording. So yes, if anybody, I will have some more guests and stories and everything. So please, I'm going to try to release every so often as much as I can. I'm the one editing and doing everything. So we'll see. But yeah, thank you so much for listening and have a good day. Bye. Bye.